through the document, and we intend to provide very extensive comments by the August 5th deadline. But there was a couple of points I just wanted to raise today for board consideration and conversation. You know, we certainly recognize that this is a very complex issue, and without a doubt, our companies are supportive of efforts to try to reduce the amount of trash that's flowing into the state's waterways. We heard this morning about the various tracks and various compliance pathways through Track 1 and Track 2. And from our standpoint, I think it's fair to say that we believe that the structural control mechanisms certainly provide the most effective means of preventing all the trash from entering the state's waterways. You heard some comments earlier from some of the other public advisory group members talking about the success of those efforts in the LA area. There was a report I was reviewing yesterday, though it is from 2012, indicating that the city of LA, by utilizing various capture and deflecting devices throughout the region, has been able to reduce the amount of trash flowing into the LA River watershed by about 90%, well ahead of the TMDL milestones. Having said that, though, about the structural controls, we certainly recognize that not all of the entities required to comply here may be in a position to go down that path, and there may be some flexibility needed to try to meet some of these water quality objectives. Those could be a variety of different issues and programs: litter education, expanded recycling, additional access to public trash cans. I think those are maybe some more realistic options that some jurisdictions may need to explore. But the point I wanted to try to emphasize today is, regardless of the approach that is adopted, I think it's in our view that the board should require appropriate monitoring requirements be established that have a demonstrated effectiveness in reducing trash, not just essentially an exercise in speculation. We think if we implement this, we're going to have an overall impact on reducing trash. You know, bear in mind that the report and the policy defines trash very broadly. It's not just plastic, it's not steel, aluminum, paper, other synthetic or natural materials. So you have a pretty broad spectrum of products and materials that could be subject to this policy. As Mr. Bishop mentioned earlier, there is this open-ended question of the idea of extending compliance time through the adoption of regulatory source controls. And in the document, it is described as a couple of examples are given: restrictions on the use of single-use bags and expanded polystyrene foam. We have a different take on this particular issue than what you heard earlier. And in our view, that we fail to see how local ordinances that ban, for instance, polystyrene foam materials, without any sort of corresponding restriction on a likely replacement product, is going to result in a reduction in overall trash. And I think if you dive through the staff report, there is some references to some audits that have been done on those jurisdictions that have, for example, implemented restrictions on polystyrene containers. I'll just quote really briefly from one of the reports referenced in the staff report, saying that data from the city of San Francisco confirmed that eliminating all food-related polystyrene would simply change the type of litter found on our streets and our waterways. The result is an increase in non-polystyrene related litter items, thus showing, quote, no overall reduction in litter or trash to the waterways. So given this point, the concept of incentivizing the local adoption of ordinances prohibiting certain single-use products, that's the kind of definition used in the staff report, in our view shouldn't be included in the policy. These policies do have, and I think you'll hear from some folks during the public comment period, some negative impacts on downstream users, restaurants, convenience stores. They impact manufacturers, consumer product companies. And so we also think that the board should also be cautious when incentivizing or rewarding the adoption of these ordinances without fully understanding some of the environmental trade-offs that could occur. Mandating requirements that companies or restaurateurs or others utilize a different package could result in some often unintended and overlooked environmental impacts, whether it's increased water consumption, energy uses. So there are a variety of trade-offs I think that the board ought to consider. And yet I think in our view, these one-off prohibitions on single-use products don't necessarily demonstrate a reduction in overall trash flowing into the waterways. So I think in summary, I just want to emphasize that regardless of the compliance approach that is adopted, we do believe that the board should require an appropriate monitoring system be in place and that monitoring system should demonstrate that the effectiveness in reducing overall trash, not just one potential component of the overall trash stream. And so we would encourage the board, perhaps during this interim period, to convene a group of experts who can be knowledgeable on how trash can be measured, some of the success of these programs, beyond just the regulatory source controls, but other ways in which to demonstrate the effectiveness of some of the Track 2 elements that were identified, so that entities and others that are forced to comply with this requirement have a better understanding of what they can do under the Track 2 system to ensure compliance. So we're more than willing to help in that regard. We'd like to sit down and offer up our expertise, some of the experts that have worked with us in the various regional boards around the state. Again, we certainly support this overall objective. We think it's important to have a statewide uniform policy in doing so. We've been involved in a lot of the activities that I think would be characterized as Track 2 elements. We've worked with state parks, we've worked with Caltrans. I know a number of our member companies are looking to establish recycling programs and have established recycling programs around the state. So all of those I think are important elements, and I want the board to know that we're certainly here to be an active participant in this, but at the same time, any sort of action that may be required and implemented should have this demonstrated effect on actually achieving the overall goal objective, and not just having in effect a substitution effect, if you will, of the trash that might be found in the state's waterways. So with that, again, we'll be submitting some comments by the August 5th deadline, and look forward to working with the board as this program and policy is implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, I have your card, but do you want to be later or now? Okay. Jeff is also a member of the PAG.
I thought I might actually just listen today, but not possible. Good morning. My name is Jeff Barroso. I'm the Executive Director for the California Stormwater Quality Association, or CASQA. And I really was hoping mostly to listen today. I'm kind of interested to hear other people's comments. I've had a chance to comment quite a bit through the PAG, going back a number of years, and we'll obviously be commenting on the 5th as well. I might just give you sort of a range of observations, cautionary tales, lessons learned that I think are sort of coming out today a little bit, and obviously there'll be more later on. Gina, if you can put up the first slide. A couple of ironies. This is the first Earth Day poster from Walt Kelly. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Craig. Oops. And kind of ironically, here it is 40 some odd years later, and when he picked a subject for that poster, he decided to pick on trash in the swamp. So this problem of trashing our environment as a species, it seems like it's with us, and it's a very intractable problem, something almost innate in our behavior. Those of us that run storm drain systems, it's particularly vexing because where do people throw stuff out? They tend to throw it down and away from themselves. Well, what is down and away? Well, the storm drain inlets are down and away, so kind of goes right in there like a basketball shot almost sometimes. Also, of course, the Ironized Cody ads from the 1960s again was based on the problem was trash pollution and litter, of course. So it's a problem that's theoretically it's actually 100% preventable. In my role as the executive director for BASMA, I actually wrote a letter to the editor of the Oakland Tribune the other day about trash. We did public service announcements and letters to the editor from time to time to try and get the public to do the right thing. And every time we put one in there about litter, we say it's 100% preventable. If people don't litter, then trash doesn't happen, except for maybe the accidental thing that happens from time to time. But yet, and we think most people don't litter, probably a very small percent actually actively litter, but it doesn't take many to do that, to cause that problem. So just a cautionary tale that this is it seems almost inherent in our species that we're going to litter our environment to some degree. We have to figure out how to deal with that. You also saw a slide that was interesting. We've got it as well. This is from the Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Program in the South San Francisco Bay Area. They put this slide together showing all the sources of trash or litter to our receiving waters, many of which do not go through the storm drain system. So we had to be a little careful not to get too myopic about this and then too focused. Certainly it's important to focus on the storm drain system, but there really are sort of 4 pathways: the MS4s, wind-blown trash, direct dumping or illegal dumping, and then people being in the receiving water itself, maybe as a camper or homeless person trashing the environment as well. So we could hit 0% or zero trash as an effluent limitation and be sorely disappointed that we still have a lot of trash and litter in our receiving waters because of the other ways that it gets in there. Not to speak of when you get out to the Pacific Ocean and other oceans, stuff going over the side of ships on their way between countries. There are, as you've heard, a wide variety of levels of trash in any community for the most part, and that's come out in the Bay Area quite a bit in particular. So we're encouraged by the prioritization that's in the current trash amendment, where it would focus on high trash generation areas. I think you'll hear from the Bay Area that they've actually refined that a little bit further, so it's not just sort of standard land uses, but they've actually looked at what really are the driving factors for the areas of our community that are most trashed, if you will. And they tend to be high density areas, as you can imagine, with a lot of people, areas that have, unfortunately, lower household income levels. And somebody mentioned it earlier, I think actually Miriam mentioned this, it's becoming quite clear that people on the go consuming things, whether it's food, drink, or cigarettes, are a very significant source as well. Another interesting fact that's come out of studies in the Bay Area of storm drains and what's in storm drains is that sometimes as much as 2/3 of the trash in the storm drain is actually organic matter, leaves, twigs, debris from trees. Ironically, street trees contribute a lot of stuff, I won't call it trash, but stuff to our storm drains, and makes you wonder whether that we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit on that question, but something another challenge to this problem. You've got a policy call to make here too, of course, and that is, if we push full capture devices, we're really pushing the private cost, if you will, of a product or a behavior to the public good, essentially. You're kind of moving it over on the ledger columns. And so, again, you've got a pollutant of concern here that is 100% preventable. If we put full capture in, we're basically saying we can't control ourselves well enough to stop it at the personal responsibility level.
Yeah.
We're going to be pushing more for.
One thing about that 100%, you know, where I live in, you know,
Yeah.
near the Golden Gate Bridge, and the wind blows really hard about 3 o'clock on a lot of days, especially during the summer. So the litter that I see and have done by accident, I don't know if it was preventable. I sure try to hold that stuff down.
I know, yeah.
But yeah, you know, I'm not sure if it's 100% preventable.
Be close, yeah. It's certainly the accidental thing issue is a concern. I would say that the amendment, we're encouraged by the fact that it's generally consistent with the LA approach and the Bay Area approach. Obviously, you heard about some nuances there that we're going to have to iron out, but I think that's generally favorable. You should know that in talking to folks about full capture devices, we've asked them, how did you pay for those? Because they can be quite expensive. In the Bay Area in particular, it turned out that the amendments, or excuse me, the permit was adopted on the heels of the Great Recession in 2009. And so they actually put in a number of devices, but it was all done with grant money. The San Francisco Estuary Partnership and ABAG in the Bay Area got a $5 million ARA grant and used that to then help cities and counties put in full capture devices around the Bay Area. And I think many other communities will tell you that they've been able to pay for those primarily through grants that they've gotten, which is wonderful, of course, but it's hard to build a program and infrastructure just on grants. So just be aware that the funding of full capture devices is a challenge. And I think that's why some people look to other BMPs, because full capture can be so expensive. Interestingly, in terms of board member Dodek's question about monitoring and assessment, be aware that in the Bay Area they have a Prop 84 grant called Tracking California's Trash. It's one of the planning and monitoring grants, and the idea of that really is to develop methods for assessing and monitoring trash of other types of BMPs. I mean, by definition, full capture is determined to be 100% performance. But what about street sweeping? What about partial capture? What about all these other things? So in the Bay Area, starting actually now and going until about early 2017, this grant project will try and develop methods, and actually working with some LA communities as well, for how can we monitor trash in our storm drain systems and the receiving waters up on land itself, to figure out how are we reducing trash in a more quantitative way, so that we can actually say track 2 is as good as if you do the following things. Right now it's hard for us to say that because we don't have the ability to measure things very well. But look to that grant project to hopefully come up with some answers.
What
And
is the
then
timeline for that? Does anyone know?
it's underway now, and I think it finishes up in, I want to say early 2017. It's a several-year project.
Okay.
And part of it has to wait for, it has to actually have a wet season. Hopefully we have a wet season coming. Five Gyres is involved in that as one of the consultants on the project, and then Al Galita and SWRCB are actually on the technical advisory committee as well. We're actually waiting for Charlie Moore to get back from his voyage so he can attend the meeting. I think those are the main things I wanted to mention. Obviously, kind of a random list of things. Also be aware that CASCWA, recognizing that beyond the Bay Area and the LA folks that are members of our organization, the rest of the state, this is like, wow, this could be huge. It could be very expensive. What is this thing about trash? How are we going to get our arms around it? So CASCWA is going to be putting on a webinar on Tuesday, July 29th for our members to say, and we're going to have, luckily we're going to have folks in the Bay Area and LA, giving them a primer really on, okay, welcome to the world of trash control and reduction. Here's some lessons learned. Here are the tricks of the trade. Here's what to look out for. So hopefully that will help get people up to speed and make their comments back to you more constructive and helpful as well. I think I'll just leave it at that, unless there's any questions.
Okay, we will take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 11:15. We'll probably be here until about 12:30. So keep that in mind if you need to go grab a bite to eat. they say? What did the doctor say?
Skin irritation is an allergy. He gave me some ointment.
But mainly just don't wear glasses.
Don't wear glasses. Apparently, I've developed sensitive skin in that area to plastics and metals and whatnot. So, I know.
That's weird.
That is really weird. And as long as I wear my contacts, I'm fine. Actually, it's starting to go away.
Yeah.
But as soon as I put anything on there, it's like breaks out.
You're going to need to have goggles.
Mine's not really that workshop. How are you?
Make sure that
I didn't realize this was a full like board up here. I thought you guys were going to just be sitting in the audience and stuff. This is great. I'm glad that you're prepared. I'm sorry about saying on the video and that's all. I tried. I guess I wanted to just talk about the issue of shooting. I agree with shooting. It's just the shooting. Where's that question? I completely agree with what she said. Yeah, so I just want to tell her I agree with her. Yeah.
Okay, Janine, let's start. Okay, we are going to reconvene. Everyone's having such a good time, but we are actually going to reconvene on close to on time. And I'm going to ask, there's a wide range of requests for time. But most folks have requested around 5 minutes. And I think we have enough time to certainly allow the 5-minute request. But if you can do it in more briefly, you get out earlier for lunch. So let's start. We'll start with Chris Kraft, who has waited patiently, and then we'll have Paul Cingarella.
Good morning, Vice Chair and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's workshop and for the, sure. I'm a little taller than the last people.
Introduce who you're representing.
My name is Chris Kraft. I'm the engineering manager with the City of Roseville, a Phase 2 community. Today I represent the thoughts and concerns that we've developed in the brief time that we've been able to review the document presented by the board several weeks ago. We share the common concern with regards to the environment and the impact that trash may have on the beneficial uses of state waters. We do desire to partnership with both the state and regional boards to determine how best to address trash impacts to the state waters. That said, we have the following for your consideration. First, we have submitted a letter from our mayor requesting that the board grant an extension of time for public review comment based on the following concerns. The board has been silent on the trash amendment following the stakeholder meeting from May 2013. Frankly, we were surprised to be noticed that the amendment was on the street on June 10th with less than 60 days to respond. Many jurisdictions that were not part of the stakeholder discussions are literally seeing the draft amendment for the first time and have barely begun to understand what it means to their communities. Our desire is to work with the board to understand and be understood relative to the implications of the amendment and to be able to provide meaningful and effective comments that ensure the best available cost technology. The amendment seems to contain aspects that were not fully understood nor discussed as permittee responsibilities during the stakeholder meetings, such as pre-production plastics and municipal responsibilities for capture devices on private properties. Subsequently, more time is needed to understand the proposed requirement. Cost, effectiveness, and the practical application of the amendment have not been fully realized, and again provide meaningful comment, and in the fairness for those who will be responsible for its implementation, more time is needed. We did receive a telephone notice on Monday stating that our request for a time extension was denied. We understand that the board had received a number of time request extensions from other jurisdictions, as well as from State Senator Nielsen. We respectfully ask that you reconsider those requests and provide an additional 60 days for public review period. Of major concern to many of us is finding a balanced approach to the cost of implementation. During the past several years of a major recession, many municipalities were forced to rely on reserves, limit their services, adjusting staff levels, and in some cases, filing for bankruptcy. As we continue to recover from the recession, our city is barely at a break-even point. The combined capital and ongoing costs for implementation to our city will exceed or reach $10 million. A cost-benefit approach to full containment should be weighed against other priorities of the MS4 permit. There are only so many dollars that can be directed away from other general fund expenses, which include the cost of the implementation of the rest of the permit. Both Phase 1 and Phase 2 communities face the same budget constraints. Establishing new laws and regulations is a starting point to comprehensive environmental solutions, but falls short when funding is not part of the equation. The real work begins with implementation, and that requires money. High costs of implementation with the expectation that local municipalities can continue to absorb these added costs transfers the difficult decisions of finding adequate legislative means of funding such programs to the local elected officials, who are then forced to make the hard decisions and service cuts that their constituents are already paying for. There has been some headway in recent developments of AB 2403, introduced by Assemblyman Redden, which has the potential to provide some funding towards the preservation of our water resources. There have been many other suggestions: a revisit of 218, a surcharge or deposit on single-use products, product bans, or a ballot initiative to establish a rightful tax. Any way you look at it, a more well-thought solution needs to be found on these programs, because the chosen path, in our opinion, is doomed to failure. Which brings me to my third major concern.
Well, and wrap it up, because you've had your 5 minutes, so go ahead.
Really?
Yes,
And
you have.
actually, since you're just reading from something in writing, if you wouldn't mind just submitting it to us, that way we'll have it.
I can do that.
But you can summarize.
Okay. So in closing, we do urge you to help us understand the implications of the amendment, hear us as we express our concerns, and give us more time to review and respond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Cingarella, followed by Mark Kalama, I believe.
Good morning.
Hi.
Madam Vice Chair, Board Member Doduk, and staff, and Mr. Chief Counsel, Paul Cingarella here today on behalf.
Wait a minute, why does Michael get singled out?
You
Is
don't
that an
know?
attorney thing?
It's
Okay.
kind of an attorney thing. I hope you're okay with that. It's, he actually asked me to come up front and spell him for a while earlier today, but so. Good morning. I'm here today on behalf of DART Container, and we at Dart Container, we're experiencing a little cognitive dissonance, because when we're upstairs meeting with Cal Recycle, they're actually giving us awards for waste reduction. We're talking to them about the progress that's been made in the state of California with regard to curbside pickup and recycling that includes foam, single-use foodware in over 65 jurisdictions. Millions of people are recycling single-use foam foodware in the state. We understand that this material is banned in a number of jurisdictions, so I guess the cognitive dissonance is pretty broad. But here before you, in looking at the track 2 and the focus on regulatory source controls, and tucked into that bans, we're concerned because the structure of track 2, we think, will definitely result in not only ban 1, but ban 2, and not only ban 2, but ban 3, because we've seen this movie before. No offense to our jurisdictions in this state, they've got a tremendous challenge in juggling economic priorities, but when you give the MS4s an opportunity to extend things out, they will take it. It's not too hard to ban something. And we've seen that for a variety of different products in the state of California. And we'll see it again. And you're certainly encouraging it through track 2. So I step back from this and I ask, boy, do we have an opportunity here? Do we actually have an opportunity to do something that's pretty straightforward? Board members Moore and D'Adamo, welcome back. You caught me in midstream here. Do we have an opportunity to do something pretty straightforward? I spend a lot of time crafting language for this thing or that thing, this policy, that policy, this brief, that brief. And I have to tell you, I really appreciate the work that staff have put into, and Mr. Chief Counsel, in the development of track 2. It's a elegant piece of work on paper, right? But it's only going to be helpful to the water bodies in the state of California and the people in the state of California if it works. And if it doesn't work, then what do we have? I looked up a definition this morning. I'll read you the definition. And the definition, I'll give you the term after I read the definition, is doing something simple in a very complicated way that is not necessary. That's the definition of a Rube Goldberg approach. That's not what's intended here. Certainly what's down on paper is elegant, but we've seen this movie before, and what you're wading into is an area that puts you out on a limb legally, I believe. I'll talk briefly about that because that's not my main point this morning, but also that raises great questions of policy. Where do you want to go? Do you want to see trash pulled out of the water sooner? Or do you want to tolerate trash in the water while the municipalities get themselves kind of wound up over more bans, more ordinances? I don't think that's where you want to be. So on the legal side, I've got 3 very quick points, and we'll elaborate on these in a few weeks. One is your statutory mandate. You've got very powerful statutory authorities, but we don't think that you can come out of the storm drain, which you define very broadly to include even the curb and the gutter, out of the storm drain and into the world of product regulation. We think that's what this does. We know you don't think of it that way, but if it is the logical and practical end result of your policy, then that's what you're doing. And it is the logical and practical end result of track 2. There's a constitutional issue here. There is this thing called the Commerce Clause, and it turns out that that Congress gave to EPA, and EPA gave to you under the Federal Clean Water Act a lot of Commerce Clause power, but not the full plenary Commerce Clause. You don't have that. And somewhere along the way, if you get disconnected from the notion of navigability, you've lost the Commerce Clause, and we think that Track 2 probably does that. And the third point is, I know this isn't a permit, but MEP is pretty important here because we're talking about BMPs. Sorry to use the jargon, but we all know this. Here, we don't think a ban equals a BMP. There's no connection there as a generality. Now, you can look at some bans and say, well, that one was a BMP, but not all bans. And certainly in the world that I live in, with Dark Container, which is a manufacturer of single-use foam cups and containers, what are we going to see practically speaking here? Well, you know, we're already seeing it. The bans that we've been studying result in this substitution effect. They don't result in a reduction of trash in the water. The substitution effect can result in environmental impact, and those environmental impacts haven't been studied in your secret document. And then the substitution effect can result in unintended economic consequences as well. These are all the practical implications of certain types of bans, maybe not all bans.
And you'll put all of that into writing, correct?
I will.
Because the next speaker is also from DART, so
Okay.
are you eating into his time?
I'm coming up to a resounding wrap-up
Okay,
here.
good. Thank you.
And I have a question for you on
Sure.
Track 2, and I know we've met and
Yes.
talked about recycling opportunities. Doesn't Track 2 provide for the leeway for municipalities to adopt recycling programs that could also result in a reduction?
Well, you know, I would hope so. I'm focused more on the bans because that seems to be the focus of Track 2. But to the extent that Track 2 promotes recycling and producer responsibility and product stewardship and a material neutral approach, we'd be fine with those principles. But we're not fine with bans per se because of the issues that have gone through here. So and let me wrap up right here. I would ask you to be very, very careful here because I think you are potentially, I think you are at cross purposes here with the California legislature because to Board Member D'Adamo's point, recycling, good, consistent with the legislature, but bans of a product that is being recycled to the extent that single-use foam cups and containers are being recycled, bad. You're at cross purposes with the goals of the state of California to achieve recycling. You're potentially at cross purposes with DTSC because they do have ban power under the Green Chemistry Initiative and the ability to regulate products. And you're at cross purposes with Cal Recycle. So a lot of stuff to sort through. I don't know how you're going to accomplish all that in the short time frame that you've left for yourselves. So I think perhaps other alternatives, cutting it back at this point and avoiding these problems is not the worst thing, and then you avoid the Rube Goldberg. Thank you.
Mark, followed by Ian Wren.
And I appreciate your patience with me.
And I'm assuming Mark's not going to, oh, my goodness, hi.
Hello, Vice Chair Spivey Weber. How are you? It's Mark Gray
Yeah.
from, well,
I
good
know.
morning. So I hope I was clear on my card with that. Well, thank you.
Or
My name is Mark Gray, and I'm testifying on behalf of Dark Container Corporation. And I've about 30 years of experience working on solid waste management and water quality protection issues in the Pacific Northwest and California, and have spent a substantial portion of my career addressing complex waste management and recycling issues such as trash and litter control, and finding solutions to complex environmental problems. I have just a few points to emphasize today, two specifically regarding the draft amendments to the statewide water quality control plans to control trash, and we will elaborate more on these points in our comment letter. First, we must ask, will the Track 2 plan of implementation that includes regulatory controls, such as a product ban on polystyrene foam foodware, have the intended effect of reducing the amount of litter that is conveyed to receiving waters via the MS4? And we believe the answer is no. And in fact, bans of polystyrene foam foodware are not true source controls. In the solid waste management and stormwater community, it's generally accepted that source controls must actually reduce overall trash in this instance of the application of a source control. CalRecycle, Paul mentioned, for example, has a definition that says source controls must, and I quote, result in reduction in waste at the source rather than substitution by another product or package of equivalent or greater volume. Bans, and particularly bans of polystyrene foam foodware, fail this test. My research shows that bans of polystyrene foam foodware do not reduce overall trash. They simply result in substitution of non-banned products for banned products. That is, the composition of litter and trash in receiving water may change, but the amount of trash does not change. And I have a couple examples of this. I've analyzed a couple data sets that show a clear substitution effect. I'll be quick. The aforementioned San Francisco experience. That'll be in the comment letter. Number two, in Santa Cruz, a polystyrene foam foodware ban was enacted in 2007 and enforced in 2008, with litter cleanups since then showing little effect on overall litter loads. And in fact, data from river cleanups between 2008 and 2011, the mass actually exceeded baseline 2007 loads, suggesting that the ban did not have the intended effect of decreasing litter. Cities in the San Francisco Bay Area Regional Board have been relying in bans in part to reduce trash in receiving water since at least 2012 when the implementation plans went into effect. But none of their monitoring reports, when you dig into all the reports, show that bans of polystyrene foam food are effective. So in sum, bans of polystyrene foam food are not source control. The bans that Track 2 will incentivize will not reduce trash in receiving waters. Instead, they divert resources from approaches that have been proven to work. And if you dive into those annual reports, you'll see those approaches, and many of them have been mentioned today. So that brings me to my second point in the remaining time I have. As a scientist, I look for comparative data with a good control. We have somewhat of a natural experiment here in a sense. To comply with trash TMDLs, the Los Angeles Regional Board has taken an approach that relies heavily on structural BMPs that have been shown to be effective in capturing trash before it can reach the receiving water. In contrast, in the Bay Area, many of the MS4 permittees have relied on an approach that looks much like the trash control amendments Track 2. The difference in effectiveness appears stark to me. In the LA area, the municipalities are investing heavily in proven trash reduction methods, and they're reporting aggressive implementation of structural full capture controls. A review of the recent annual reports on TMDLs will reveal that to you. You cite a couple reports in your staff report. In the Bay Area, in contrast, several years into implementing the trash reductions required by the MS4 permit, the cities don't even have the data on the effectiveness of many of their BMPs, including polystyrene foam foodware bans. They're simply assuming, contrary to the available evidence, that polystyrene foam foodware bans work to reduce litter. Track 2, as it's currently drafted, would be a big mistake from a policy and scientific perspective. It takes some of the poorest performing elements and worst elements of the approach we've seen in the San Francisco Bay Area proceedings and then would make them statewide policy. And the monitoring required for Track 2 wouldn't solve these fundamental problems. The monitoring required by Track 2 isn't robust enough to show whether regulatory source controls are effective, yet Track 2 would incentivize these very controls. That is bans. So in summary, bans of polystyrene foam foodware are not source controls. They simply don't belong in the proposed trash amendments. Bans result in product substitution, not overall trash reduction. Track 2 seems to subvert the lessons of good work done in the Los Angeles region and would make the San Francisco Bay Area Bay Area approach, which is unproven and speculative at best, it would make that statewide policy. And we think that's not a good direction. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the language for Track 2, and I'm not seeing, I guess what you're saying is it may result in a ban. What would you suggest? That all other options be available except for bans?
We believe that Track 1 is the principal approach to pursue.
So you would recommend a deletion of Track 2?
Yes, I would.
And short, I would
But
Short of deletion of track 2, could track 2 be modified in a way, that allowed things like, more trash cans? I won't go into detail.
And we've heard that, and Board Member Moore, yes, we've heard that today. I think there is some, Ms. Diadama, to your point, if, as written now, we'd want to see just track 1, but I think there is some, and from the discussions we've heard today, there's also some uncertainty about many of the performance metrics. And so, yeah, I think there is some opportunity to possibly revise, especially with ones that are quantifiable and measurable.
And so in that spirit, because we're trying to introduce flexibility in all our policies that is reasonable, I encourage you in your written comments, to provide some specific, based on your scientific experience in solid waste management, some scientifically reproducible approaches that might be warranted under track 2.
Will do. Point taken. Thank you.
Ian, followed by Joanne Weber.
Good afternoon. My name is Ian Wren. I'm a San Francisco Baykeeper. I wanted to reiterate Sean's request for a either partial or whole carve-out for the Bay Area in a similar manner to what was afforded to the LA region. Much of the comments that I had were discussed earlier by Sean, and I do share Board Member Doduk's disappointment with the implementation of the MERP provisions for trash control. However, I do believe that the numeric standards and the requirements to do focused trash hotspot cleanups do represent a higher standard than what's laid out in the current proposed permit. Specifically, I guess track 1, has a one-size-fits-all approach. It doesn't really address the sources of trash that are most acutely affecting some of our urban creeks in the Bay Area, namely homelessness, windblown trash, dumping, and track 2 is basically very similar to what's being implemented in the Bay Area, and I don't believe we'll get a lot of benefits beyond that. So I think there could be some misapplied incentives through adoption of this permit for the Bay Area, and I would encourage you to consider a carve-out. I believe that the overall goal of the existing MERP provisions, which is 100% trash load reduction by 2020, is a very aggressive goal that we should allow to proceed towards its conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne Weber, followed by Dana Booth.
Good morning. I am Joanne Weber with the Watershed Planning Group with the County of San Diego. Thank you for holding this workshop today to provide us an opportunity to further understand the proposed trash amendments and provide our constructive input. The County of San Diego supports clean water. We have requested in writing a 56-day extension of the comment period to have time to brief our elected officials. I appreciate the thoughtful process and the inclusion of stakeholders in crafting the proposed trash amendments. However, I wonder if there's enough flexibility to match local needs and to balance the benefits with the costs. This new regulation would be yet another unfunded mandate for the local stormwater community to bear the full cost of implementation. Key areas of concern for us are unnecessary permitting for small communities who are rural but are still located within the footprint of the Phase 1 MS4 area. A planning effort at the state level that is disconnected from local planning efforts that results in competing priorities for already limited resources. And finally, there may be other sources of the trash that are not in the control of the MS4 agencies, and the implementation of this program by the MS4s may result in little or no benefit to the local streams and rivers. An example of unnecessary permitting is that San Diego County is a Phase 1 MS4 that encompasses both urbanized and rural areas. There are 22 community planning areas in the unincorporated areas. The rural towns of Julian and Campo have commercial areas that would be under the trash amendments. Is there a reasonable return on investment for these small communities to